As you've probably heard, there's been an ongoing battle with the Australian government and Facebook. Recently, Facebook sent the world into a frenzy when they decided to block all news sites from Facebook in Australia, as well as blocking pages operated by them. Here's why Facebook turned off news for Australia. Last February, Australia passed the News Media and Digital Platforms Mandatory Bargaining Code, effectively requiring Facebook and Google to pay publishers if they host their content. For many years, several news outlets all around the world have lobbied and complained about the process of Google and Facebook earning so much money from content that they own. With the boom of social media and the rise of digital ad revenue, traditional journalism and its business model has seen a massive decline in the past several years. The News Media Bargaining Code looks to rectify these issues by having large technology platforms that operate in Australia pay local news publishers for the content that is available or linked on their platform. The government and news publishers saw this as a fair way of sharing the slice of the pie with these big tech companies, but Facebook and Google are strongly opposed to this. What took the world by storm is how Facebook decided to respond to this new law. On February 18 of this year, Facebook blocked Australian users from sharing or viewing news content on its platform. The content blocked is not just restricted to news content originating from Australia, but the rest of the world as well. Australian news organizations were no longer able to post their content on the respective Facebook pages, and people from the country were no longer receiving news, local and international. This comes at a very sensitive time in not just Australian history, but world history as well. With the COVID-19 pandemic ongoing for a year now, and with vaccines being made available to the rest of the world this year, information regarding the virus and the vaccines are very critical. People all over the world interpreted Facebook's act as suppressing information, which is wrong and immoral, especially in the hard times we are living in today. And to make matters worse, Facebook even went as far as blocking Facebook pages that are operated by the Australian government, even if they were eventually reinstated. As you could expect, people from Australia and all over the world weren't exactly thrilled with Facebook's response to this new law, with users voicing their frustrations on all their social media platforms, causing much controversy to the biggest social media platform in the world. Even for users based outside of Australia, they won't be able to post links to Australian news sites. Facebook, in a way, unfriended Australia. People saw this as greedy on Facebook's side, showing a resistance to share the massive profits they gain from the other people's content. Facebook responded to all these allegations and accusations. Campbell Brown, Facebook's vice president of global news partnerships, wrote this in a blog post. Quote, "What the proposed law introduced in Australia fails to recognize is the fundamental nature of the relationship between our platform and publishers. Facebook does not steal news content. Publishers choose to share their stories on Facebook. I hope in the future we can include news for people in Australia once again." End quote. Facebook also stated that a large bulk of their revenue doesn't even come from news. They claim that news only makes up for less than 4% of the content people see in their news feed. In a way, they're saying that they don't need the news to function. On the other hand, Facebook did account for over 5 billion clicks to Australian news websites in 2020. Australia responded to the statement made by the Facebook executive. The Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, ironically stated on his Facebook page the implications of what Facebook has done and what it means for the country and the rest of the world. He said that it, quote, "confirms the concerns that an increasing number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies who think they are bigger than governments and that rules should not apply to them." Facebook's actions to unfriend Australia today, cutting off essential information services on health and emergency services, were as arrogant as they were disappointing. They may be changing the world, but that doesn't mean they run it. End quote. A handful of ministers told Parliament that Facebook's move was nothing short of an assault on democracy and would damage the company's reputation. It also proved what already many people know, just how powerful the company has become. It's worth noting that the 26 million people that make up for the population of Australia, 13 million of those are active Facebook users. Josh Frydenberg, Australia's treasurer, stated that he and Facebook executive chief Mark Zuckerberg had an ongoing dialogue to constructively discuss the new code. Zuckerberg's concerns were that some aspects of the code and interpretation of some of its elements were very unfavorable to Facebook. Regardless, the government was very firm on their stance regarding the code. One of the biggest problems with Facebook is that misinformation and disinformation is easily spread. We saw this evident during the 2016 US presidential campaign, in which fake news and disinformation played a strong part in Donald Trump's victory. Today, fake news should be taken even more seriously with the COVID-19 pandemic. Fake news regarding the virus, wearing masks, and efficacy of vaccines has seemed to create a cult of personality in some people questioning the validity of the virus, using PPEs, and the vaccine. Many were concerned that with the absence of legitimate news sources on Facebook, we could see these things multiply at an alarming rate. This is coming at such a pivotal time in our history, when hopes of putting an end to this ongoing pandemic is starting to become a reality. Having no news on Facebook, in which over 85% of Australians look to as their main source of news, could cause further complications. Facebook has admitted in the past that they need to play a bigger role in controlling fake news and misinformation. However, banning news on Facebook in Australia is counterproductive to that cause. So much of life happens in the space of social media. In a day and age where we are social distancing and wearing masks, social media is one of the ways people can interact with each other, not to mention being a source of news. Make no mistake, Facebook definitely should not be your primary source of news, but that's just the reality of the world we live in. But Facebook does have a valid counterargument here. Their reasoning for the news ban was to give readers and Facebook users a taste of what's to happen if this media code were to be passed. This was Facebook's gamble to sway Australian lawmakers to add a few amendments to the law, which would result to a version of the law that would be preferred by Facebook. While the Facebook debacle was ongoing, Google decided for a different approach. Google was working out deals with major Australian publications, with News Corp, owned by tycoon Rupert Murdoch, being the first company that agreed to a deal with Google. Murdoch has been a strong champion of this new law, having had a very vocal stance on digital platforms to pay his publications. Some can even argue that the law was made specifically for him, but we'll leave that up to debate. In addition to News Corp, Seven West Media made closed a deal as well with Google. And after 8 days of the news blackout on Facebook, news finally returned on the platform in Australia. During that same time, Facebook also inked a 3-year deal with News Corp. They also agreed to deals with Schwartz Media and Solstice Media. After playing hardball, Facebook finally complied to the new media code. Revisions were probably made which Facebook found more comfortable to agree to. But the fact remains that this is Facebook complying with media law passed in the country. It seems the two are back to a fruitful relationship. How long this will be remains to be seen. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to get updated with our content. Thank you for watching Gadget Surfer TV.